everybody, today we're going to make a video and it is going to be on tuning drag cars that are turbocharged. So this is going to be a look at kind of how I go about things when it comes to in between rounds of tuning drag race cars. I've gotten a lot of questions about this over the years, and I typically don't like to talk about it, but push came to shove and here we are. So you've got your Holley Dominator, or your HP, or your Terminator X. You've got all your sensors. You've got your car running. You want to go to the racetrack, and you have no idea what to do. So, kind of give you a little bit of a basis as to the way I approach things, right? So right now I've got the base fuel map open in Holley software, and I've got a data log overlaid on top of it. So if you don't know how to do that, the first thing we need to do is you would go in here and you would go to data log after you've already downloaded your data log from the ECU, and you would open your data log, you'd select it and whatnot. Then once you've had your data log open, which would look like this, you're going to hit data log and then hit, well, it would say remove overlay, but it'll say activate overlay. So what we're doing is we're activating an overlay of the data log that is, this green line shows everything that is seen on the screen of the data log. So if you feel as if you've got some fuel tuning issues or some timing issues or some issues that you got going on down the racetrack, the first thing I want to do is show you that there's a good way to look at this type of stuff. So if you left click over here in the minimize screen and you minimize your data log, you grab a hold of it up here and you toss it to the side, you can split screen your laptop. Okay, so that's one little thing that you can do just to make it a little bit easier. Than you use this arrow over here, and now you can look at what you got going on here, right? So notice it overlays. Now, for a pass, this is a quarter-mile pass, but for a pass, we don't need to see all this, right, and spool up unless that's the area of concern. So we're going to left-click, hold, drag, and highlight just the run. And notice we lost that spool up area, and we lost some more of that decel area, right? So it gives us a little bit of a zoomed in view. Now, wherever I click, you'll notice that the little yellow dot moves, right? So as RPM's increasing, you see it increasing over here, and as it's decreasing, right, it's down here. So it's following our scales of map and RPM, right? So if you didn't know that, and now you do. So when you activate an overlay, it's a very powerful thing. And that overlay works in all of your tables, right? So this is your spark table. We just looked at that. Here's your boost table. If we look at boost versus time, if you notice it's overlaid, right? So that yellow dot is showing us where we're at in the run, you know, in correlation to here on the data log versus here on our boost versus time graph. So, so what do we do, right? What do? We got all of our stuff and we're ready to go fast, right? So let's just assume that that this is a pass we just made, and we're going to start to dissect this pass and look at which ways we can improve, right? So I'm going to maximize this here for a moment. So here's our run. So the way I dissect data is I do this based off of increments, right? So let's say we have a car like this one. I believe this car went 111 on this pass in the 60-foot, and we want to go faster to the 60-foot. So we don't care if we're trying to go faster to the 60-foot. We don't care from like 1.2 on, right? Like that doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go here at 1.2, and I'm going to zoom in from there to the launch. So now we've got very minimal amount of data to look at, right? So if we break this into subsets, we have a lot better view on what we're looking at. So granted, what we have highlighted here, throttle position, isn't much to look at. RPM isn't much to look at, you know, boost, whatever, drive shaft. But as we start adding things, it becomes a little bit easier to dissect, right? So a lot of people use timing retards to get them to leave the starting line. So we can look at our timing retard, and here's our ignition timing. And this is total ignition timing, right? If you have advanced tables, it'll show up as total. So you know, this is all data from my own personal car. This was actually the first time we were ever out in quarter mile trim. I had a 148 first gear in the transmission and a 360 rear gear, and we learned that this thing did not like 260 foot like it used to, right? Just did not want to run up front like it used to with the eighth mile gear. Granted, this is the first time out with the car, so this was actually, I think, pass 4 on the car, right? Yep, qualify 4. So, we overcame quickly, but we didn't set the world on fire. Now, this car with the quarter mile or with the eighth mile gear in it has been 104 with a 9. And then we put this 360 rear gear in it, and we start going 111 after having to hammer it to get it to move, right? So let's look at what we would change in order to get this thing to accelerate faster. So how do we know what our rate of acceleration? Well, we've got drive shafts, but we can also add x-axis G meter, right? So if you're not familiar with what a G meter is, this is a VPS, right? So it's a Davis Technologies vehicle position sensor. And what this does is tells us x-axis, which is front to back, y-axis, which is side to side, z, which is up and down, pitch, roll, and yaw, right? So pitch is wheelie, roll is if the car is tilting one side to the other, yaw is if the car is driving one side to the other. But for everything going on and going straight, we're looking at x-axis, right? So a lot of people focus on what the peak G number is, okay? So this thing peaks VPS, if we look up here, maximum 2.53. So right where I clicked is where it peaks, okay? So it peaks at 2.5 G. So again, with this car with the eighth mile gear in it, it would go right around 2.9 G. It slowed down dramatically. We just lost a lot of mechanical advantage, and we just could not leave on enough power and get the power in fast enough to run the way we wanted it to run. So a lot of you guys that are watching this are probably like, God dang, I wish I could go 111 60 foot. Well, once you go 105, you don't want to go 111 anymore. So it's the same thing as if you go 130 now and you're dreaming of going 120s. Once you go 120s, you don't want to talk about going 130s. So it's all relative. So take this information, with a grain of salt and try to apply this theory and logic behind your own combination, right? So this it's all relative to your combination. So the way you make your modifications to the tune-up. So also, if you've watched any of my other screen capture videos and complained about my audio, I hope I have it fixed now. But anyway, so notice down here we've got a 0 mark, right? So that means I zero this based off of the boost versus time, right? So if I show you that, we're going to go here, automatically set 0 times ZA, and it says when boost time is greater than 0.0 seconds, right? We hit OK, it sets us back. I had it at, there we go, and there. So if we look, this vertical line is 0.0, and this is the moment that the trans brake's released. So a lot of people think that the moment you let go of the trans brake is when the car starts to move, and that's not accurate, okay? So if we look at this VPS x-axis, let me get rid of some of this other stuff just so it's a little bit easier to see, right? So we've got RPM, we've got our 0 marker, so the trans brake was released right here, okay? And this is our VPS x-axis. So our VPS x-axis is still flat. The car hasn't even budged. It hasn't even loaded the tire at all. Like, nothing's happened. The car has not started to accelerate forward. So if we look at our time right there, right, our time is 0.59. This car typically will react about 7 to 8 hundredths away from when you let go of the trans brake. So people ask, well, why is that? Well, because a lot of stuff has to happen between the moment you let go of that trans brake and the car actually starts to accelerate, right? So the solenoid's got to disengage, and then the the band and all that kind of all the stuff inside all the magic that happens in the transmission and converter has to happen, and then the driveline has to get loaded. It has to go through the ring and pinion, and then apply through the axles to the tire, from the tire to the racetrack. So in all reality, 0.07 is not a long time for this thing to react. And I can say that with the different gear set in it, it would react a little bit faster. And every time the car would get a little faster in the 60 foot, the reaction of the car got faster, right? Because we were able to leave on more power. So the less power you leave on, the longer this takes. So this is kind of like your reaction time, but it's your vehicle's reaction time, right? So on your ticket, you get a reaction time to how fast the car left the the guard beam, right, at the racetrack. But this is kind of like your vehicle's reaction time. So here's when you let go of the button. This is when you said, "Hey, I want to go," right? And then this is when the car said, "Okay, fine, I'm moving." You know. So so anyway, you know, kind of keep that in mind. So when you're chasing this, I want to show you this. I'm gonna minimize this, and we'll toss it over there. Now look at that. We are already in almost a tenth into our boost versus time table, okay, before the car has even moved. So there's probably going to be people in here that are looking at this and going, you know, well, why don't you just pin the gate shut immediately and blah, 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 and then use timing to drive that car. That's fine. Go ahead. Go for it. This combination, you can't do that with it. So a lot of combinations, you can't do that with it. When the cars you're working with are, you know, running, 125, 130, 60 foots at max effort, sure, have at it. When they're 550 cars, sure. When they're making 1200 to 13, 1400 horsepower, pin the gate shut on the let go of the button and make the chassis work with it. That's great. Cars that are a good bit faster than that, you can't exactly do that, right? So you kind of have to use both. So you're going to have to kind of use a dome pressure control to keep that thing, accelerating at a reasonable rate. And then when you get to it, you may have to use a timing retard as well, right? So this car's heavy, being 3,200 pounds, and this car responds really well with a boost curve, right? So needless to say, the boost curve is all in by 1.2 into the run. So and 38 pounds of dome pressure makes 50 pounds of boost. Okay, so needless to say, it's an extremely efficient combination that works very, very well, and that's one of the reasons why you have to use a dome curve, right? A boost versus time curve. So anyway, back to our topic at hand. First 1.5 seconds, right? First 1 second of this run. Where do we find more power? So what I like to typically do is I'll look at my G meter, right? Your VPS data, right? And here's where it peaks, and where does it start to taper off? So if you compare the G meter to the RPM trace over here, let's make this larger. If you compare this G meter to the RPM trace, you'll see that the RPM trace, it might be a little easier if we zoom out a little bit. You'll see that the converter flashes nice and high, right? And the moment that the converter starts to couple, the G meter starts to fall, right? Which is good. It's fine. The converter's coupling. It's grabbing the motor, and let me close this. There we go. And the G meter starts to lay over. All right. It's not a sharp, abrupt thing. If you're a nitrous car and you're looking at this, I'm sorry. Your G meter is usually like, hey, here and then do, right? Turbo cars, they kind of drag them out a little bit longer, right? So this line, this G meter, this decline, we look at where we're at by the time we reach the 60 foot. So remember, the 60 foot didn't happen at 111 into this run, okay? The 60 foot actually happened at like right around 1.20 into this run, because it took 0.08 for the car to actually react and leave the starting line, right? So if we look at here, and there you go, 1.2. So let's just use 1.2 because it's an easy number. Where's our G meter? Our G meter is at 2.19 G, right? It's all right. We peaked it at 2.53, and by the time we reach the 60 foot, we're down at 2.19. How can we go about fixing this, right? So obviously, like, we would love to be able to keep the G meter all the way up here the whole run, but that's just not going to happen, right? So some of the big block stuff that I work with, the G meter kind of peaks out here and it just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing, and then it falls off around 2.5, 2.8 into the run. Those are 370, 360, 380 passes. That's not, this car did not run It's not that fast, right? So it's just not. So we can't have unrealistic expectations. So how can we go about doing this? Well, can we get boosting faster, right? So that's the first thing. First off, do we have a racetrack that's going to hold more boost faster, right? So that's a question you have to ask yourself. So if we think we have a racetrack that's going to hold more boost and earlier in the run, then yeah, let's try to get the boost in faster. Well, we've got a dome pressure curve, right? Like here's our dome pressure curve right here. But why wouldn't we get this thing? Why wouldn't all the boost come into here? So all the boost peaks here, but we're calling it to peak here. Well, mechanically, it just doesn't happen that fast, right? So that's why the nitrous guys out 60-foot us, because mechanically it's instant. So if it can't happen instantaneously, what do we do? Well, the next move here would be coming into your global file. And let's just start backing this up. So the next pass after this one, literally all I did was go 38, left click, hold, drag, and fill row values, and bring it in another 2/10 sooner, right? So the 60-foot will increase exponentially if you can get the car to leave harder here. So some people will say, well, why don't we leave on more boost, right? Right there. Change this to, this is the dome pressure that's being applied while we're on the trans brake. Why can't we leave on more boost with this combination? Well, because it's 16 pounds of boost and 4,300 RPM. We'd have to bump up a little bit more RPM, and we were in qualifying, 44, 4,500 RPM. We were in qualifying. I was not comfortable with giving this thing much more boost on the starting line, because if you can tell, our G meter peaks pretty quick, and I just didn't feel as if the starting line was there. These conditions were very, very good, but the cars that were going down in front of us were kind of bad, right? So the racetrack was phenomenal, but I just did not trust the racetrack because of what we could have been dealt with right in front of us. It was kind of a disaster. This was from World Cup, and if you've ever been to World Cup, you kind of understand. So I would err on the side of caution and continue to chip away at, let's leave the starting line the way it's been, the way the car has been reacting well, and let's just get the power in a little bit sooner. So this is kind of part one of this. I'm going to make a couple more parts here today and upload them. I just don't want to. I want you to be able to, kind of access this information and, kind of go back and look. Okay, part 2, part 3, whatever. So that's the first thing, man. Cut these things down, right? Cut your data logs down and look at them close, right? Way easier to look at this close and notice, what do we have? Does this fall off soon? Is there an abrupt drop? Did ignition timing do anything, right? So this ignition timing is just coming out based off of my ignition table. So we got nothing going on. Did wheelie control kick in? No, it did not. Was front wheel speed linear? Yes, right? So front wheel speed had a linear rise. It's not like it was toting the front tire. So the next video I'm about to do is going to be on the same exact data log, but we're going to look at the chassis reactions and how the chassis has reacted and how we feel like it wants a little bit more power. All right. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. I'm going to work on part 2.